What if I told you that the most powerful feature in Claude Code or any AI coding infrastructure isn't the model itself, but how you as the user and the developer harnesses it? If you keep hearing the phrase agent harness, well, this is what people are talking about. It's the controls and structure and the wrapper and the scaffolding that you put around the model, and that's actually what makes the model perform at its best. Think of it like a horse. The better the harness on the horse, the more control the rider has, right? Same principle. Now, most coders use one agent at a time in their cursor or VS Code for everything. And it fills up the context. You'll even see that little context dial at the bottom these days, right? And the more it fills up, the more junk's likely to come out. But power users build little micro agents called subagents, and they delegate to them. So today, we're going to dive into subagents in Claude Code, and I'll show you how to write custom instructions for a subagent to create on Claude Code. In the next 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to go from basic prompts to automatic subdelegation agentically. But maybe even more importantly, you're going to understand the superpower of agentic coding, which is context management. That really is the most important skill when it comes to coding with AI for most of us. But first, let's start with what are subagents. According to Claude Code, subagents are specialized AI assistants that handle specific types of tasks. So each subagent has its own domain, if you like, its own expertise, its own job, right? And it runs in its own context window. And that's really important because that context window is isolated from your main thread. Now, if you think about it from an operating systems and computer science perspective, for those of you who know the difference between processes and threads, a process has its own memory, right? It doesn't use shared memory. Think of subagents like an own agentic sub-process, right? It has its own context space, memory space, if you like, from which it takes the information it needs to run its job. And in doing so, it doesn't clutter up the memory of the main agent that you're actually interacting with. And it's no different from any form of subdelegation where somebody delegates off to somebody else so that their task list is a little cleaner and less cluttered, and they only say, come back to me with the information I need. So when Claude, for example, encounters a task that matches a description on a subagent, which is why it's so important to do good descriptions, then it'll either automatically in the background or in the foreground, depending on the description and depending on what you've said to it, it'll delegate to the subagent. A background subagent will not be blocking you, but a foreground subagent will be blocking you. And you can explicitly ask for a foreground or background, but often it'll decide based on the quality of description how it wants to do it. And that little subagent will basically go away like your minion, do the work, and come back to you with the results. But it's not enough to just understand what it is. I'm a big fan of understanding why something is required. Why does it exist? Because when you understand why it exists, it'll automatically explain what it does, right? So why do we need something like subagents? Well, there's a problem called context bloat or context rot. So effectively, if I dump a large bit of content into my agent and give it a large bit of content, let's say I give it my entire large code base that I'm working on at work, right? All of that text in the code base are tokens, and that's going to fill up the entire context or fill up a substantial amount of context. Now, it doesn't matter whether the model can handle 200K tokens or 1 million tokens. Typically, what we've seen in the industry for the last year is when you get to about 40% of your total context window, you start having degraded performance on the kind of quality of the responses from the AI. So what you want to do is really guard your context window. It's like trying to keep your own mind uncluttered, right? So you delegate off to other people or other situations, or you write it down in a post. You're basically uncluttering your mind. You want to unclutter the AI's mind as well, your main AI process, the main conversation you're having. The more things you give it and the more it continues in each turn of the conversation, you're just filling up and bloating that context window, which leads to degraded performance. So what we want to try and then do is give the really large, chunky things that your main context doesn't need to know all of it. Like let's say a large code base, or in an example that we'll do together, I'll give it a transcript from a very long YouTube video, right? Well, in that situation, that transcript does not need to be in the main agent's context. It can go to a subagent. The subagent can take up all that context temporarily and then summarize it and then return only what the main agent needs, because that can then be part of the main agent's context. So basically, it's a really clever way of context management, but you can also do this with multiple subagents at the one time, and that's really, really, really helpful. So think about it this way. Anytime your task produces very verbose output, there's a lot of input tokens or a lot of output tokens that you don't really want to clutter up in your main context, then consider using a subagent. Now, in the Claude Code ecosystem, you could use skills, you could use other things like that, but skills typically stay in the main agent's context window, right? So if you want to reuse prompts or workflows that run in the main conversation, then you probably want to stick with a skill. And I'll talk about skills in another video because that's really an important part of the plugin ecosystem. In the last video, we talked about slash commands. I showed you how I would scaffold up a Node.js TypeScript project from scratch using a single command that I reuse over and over again for weekend projects because it just does 30 minutes of work for me in a few seconds while I'm making a cup of tea, right? So it's very, very handy. Now, skills are the next level and plugins are a way to wrap all this around, but subagents are slightly different because unlike the others that I just mentioned, subagents go into their own isolated context, their own isolated subagent context, and that means you're not cluttering up your main context with all those tokens, right? So in this video, we're going to just basically build one out, and I'm going to just do it using the Claude Code CLI command. Now, I should warn that I do use a pro monthly subscription for Claude Code, and there are lower limits on the free tier, but you can certainly try it out, right? You can try it out. And if you just want to try it out for the month, take a monthly subscription and do it out. I have a subscription, so I'll have slightly different usage limits. Okay, let's then switch over to actually coding something. Okay, so now let's actually get into coding out this agent, or rather designing the agent, because we don't actually have to do any coding with Claude Code setting up an agent anymore. So this is a project that I'm actually working on right now using Cartesia. Cartesia is actually a really cool voice AI platform, and what I'm working on is something called Meet Zubin, which is Cartesia makes this very easy. So basically there's a number that you can call and my voice clone will tell you about my professional history and my work background. And basically what I've done is I've just taken my LinkedIn profile and my resume and chucked it all into the context, and the AI will answer questions for you, right? So it's a fun little project. So if anyone wants to know more about me, they can call this number, and it's really, for me to just understand more about voice AI. And Cartesia is incredible. They have something called this Line SDK, which really does a lot of the work for you. If you follow that quick start on their docs, you'll see that it's really, really quite amazing. In fact, if you follow the docs in, I think if you just start here, if you go to agents, and then if you go to talk to your first agent, and you just follow this quick start tutorial here, and you'll get the number, it'll call you, etc. You can try Cartesia call, and it'll call this number. You can call your custom number. So that's really very cool. And then this is the SDK. So what I really want to try and build today is I'm going to create an agent that'll help me ingest documents. I'm also going to show you something very cool called Git Ingest, right? So it's going to be, that's it, ingest.com. And so this is quite a cool tool, but I'll show you an easy way to use it. But basically what it does is you give it a GitHub URL, and it'll ingest a bunch of things from it. So you can copy and paste that or just download that file and give it to your LLM. But keep in mind that it adds a lot of context. It's actually a perfect use case of where, let's say I wanted all these examples in the Cartesia folders, in Cartesia's Line SDK. If I want to have all these examples as a reference, that's really something I should give to a subagent rather than clutter up my main context. And so by giving it to the subagent, I have access to all these examples, and I can produce, code snippets from that. So that's what we're going to try and do here, is we're going to build a subagent that will let us ingest all the Cartesia examples and then give us code snippets as and when we need to extend. I'm not going to build a whole app out because I want to keep this video short, but we'll do a test drive of give me an example of the code I need to do to, let's say tool calling to my agent. Well, we kick off with just a Claude session, and then I'll quickly walk you through some of my configs. So let me see what my model is. My model right now should probably be Haiku Shop. I'm going to switch it to Opus for a moment. Okay, and now to see what agents you have, you do the /agents command. Now, if you watched my last video, you would have seen what / commands are. /agents is a built-in command that just ships with Claude Code. So I'm going to see what's there. Well, there are 11 agents, all of which are built-in or plugin agents that are available through the plugin marketplace, which is something that we'll talk about in another video. But really, the only option I have here, when you look at it, is to create a new agent. So /agents is also how you create a new agent. And let's do that. Let's use Claude to help us create a new agent, right? Now it's going to ask me, do I want it in this project, so in this current directory, or do I want it in my personal, at my global level for me as a user, for Zubin as a user across all my projects? I want it locally in this project just for now, and I can always transfer it to global if I want, right? So I'm going to do it locally, and I'm going to say, yes, I want to generate with Claude, no problem. Now let's describe what this agent should do and when it should be used. So I'm going to try, it says be comprehensive for best results. Typically I would have copied and pasted something, but I'm going to show you this on the fly. I'm going to say, I want the subagent to take URLs and or file paths that I provide and ingest that information. I will then ask the agent, let's call it the subagent. I will then ask the subagent to answer questions, summarize, or give me coding guidance, including code snippets based on that information and documentation. The goal here is to give me a research and coding partner. This subagent should kick off anytime large chunks of documentation or large coding files are provided to it. In fact, I may just say coding related files are provided to it. Let's see what it comes up with. Now, typically this will take, a minute or two to generate, because what Opus is going to do is going to take your prompt, your description, which so far is quite high level, and it's going to spit something out with it, and it's going to create it in my Claude folder here. Now, my Claude folder is already here with my claude.md, so I should see a /agents directory underneath my .claude, because I've asked it to do it locally at the local level in the project. And then under the agents directory, it should produce an appropriately named agent. All right, so the first thing it's asking me here is what tools do I want? So I'm going to unselect all tools, and then I'm going to go with read-only tools, edit tools, MCP tools. For now, I'll skip it out. I'm just going to go with those two, read-only and edit tools. Then I'm going to go back up, then to continue. And now this is an important question. It's saying when you create a new subagent, what model do you want? You can hard code the model if you want for one of these. I'm going to say inherent from the parent, which means whatever model I'm using right now in the parent, use that one right before you kick off the subagent. Why do I want to do that? A, it helps me control token usage. It also helps me choose the best model. Or rather, I have control of the best model rather than hard coding the model. If I want to have a cheaper, faster, pure text kind of model, I can use Haiku. If I want to use much more advanced use cases, I'll use Sonnet or Opus. So I'm going to say inherit from the parent, which means I have to switch the model before I invoke the subagent. And it's going to ask me for a new agent column. Now, this is quite useful because what happens is in the status line, in the actual CLI, the UI, you will see this color every time your subagent is kicking off. Now, it's decided to call my subagent the doc research coder. Okay, not a terrible name. And I'm going to give it the color pink, so it's nice and bright on the screen for you guys. So it'll highlight in pink anytime my subagent's being used. Okay, and now it's saying, here's your new agent. And these are all the instructions. I can either edit it or save. And I'm going to hit enter to save. And then I'm going to edit it manually inside my Claude or my .claude directory, because I prefer reading the markdown in a more clear format. All right, so it's done that. And you can see here, it's created an agents directory. And under that, it's got this doc research coder. So I'm going to escape out of this in my terminal. Going to just minimize my terminal for a moment. Let's take a look at this. And then let's preview it and see what it's saying. Okay, you'll see that this stuff, the name, description, etc., are missing here. That's because it's all within these 3 dashes. Anything that's within these 3 dashes with this key : value sort of format that you see here is actually called front matter. Watch the video on /commands where I explain what this is. But front matter is basically a YAML specification that gives you key value pairs to help describe metadata, right? So this is the name, it's metadata. The description is this. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to call this docs ingestion assistant. Okay, and then the description is all sorts of things, so you need to go through this description and make sure it's okay. I'm just going to run with it because it seems to be reasonably thorough, but normally I'd review it in great detail. I just don't want to waste your time. And it says the core capabilities, now I'm reading from here on the right, are that it can ingest the documents, it analyzes and comprehends it, response generation. One thing I want to do is I'm going to add some guardrails in here. So I'm going to do guardrails. And the most important one is after ingesting the document, always ask the user what they, and when I say documents, what instructions they have for you. Do not take actions or produce responses without instructions first. Okay, so this, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to get it to conserve tokens, not just spit out a big response with a summary of a large thing. I want it to always take instructions. So I'm going to say always take instructions before responding or generating. If no clear instructions are provided, always ask for them first, right? That's a pretty strict guardrail. So let's see what happens. Okay, so that's fine. It's going to show up at the bottom here in guardrails. And now I'm going to close that out. And now let's see what happens when I git ingest a bunch of things. So I'm going to close out of Claude Code for now. We'll create a new session shortly. And well, I suppose the first thing I should do is just check that it's actually working. So let's open up another Claude session. So by restarting it, it'll pick up the new agent that's inside our workspace. And I want to see if it's actually there. So it'll be here you go, agents. It'll be agents, and it'll be, here you go, doc ingestion assistant. It doesn't necessarily need to be named before it'll start using it. But since I didn't proofread my description clearly, I don't know if it'll necessarily pick it up that it should be using this agent if I don't explicitly mention it. So for now, I'm going to explicitly mention it, but that's okay. We can absolutely pick it up explicitly and say, hey, you have to use this. Now let's go over here and you'll see that this is the line repo. I'm going to go into examples, right? I'm going to copy the URL and then I'm going to go to Git Ingest. Now the cool thing is I could just paste this in here, or the other really cool thing that I like is I take the URL that I've just copied, and instead of github.com, just change hub to ingest. And you will see it's starting to ingest that. And here's the whole thing, okay? Here's the whole thing, it's the file content. So you'll see that our overall summary is that it's analyzed 128 files, the subpath was examples, and this is the current commit that it's at. And then, okay, that's great. Estimated token, 77.3 thousand tokens. So you can see that's huge. I don't want all of that in my main thread, right? I don't want all of that in my main agent process. I want a sub-agent to deal with all that in its context. So I'm going to copy all this. Now, you could also download if you want. I'm just going to copy the content of the file's content, which is this massive file. Let's go back to the editor. Let me close the terminal for a moment. And then I'll just start with in project root. I'm just going to do a new file and I'm going to do docs.md, right? And then I'm just going to paste that. And there you see, it's just this massive massive document, right? And it has a whole bunch of examples in there, whole bunch of examples. Okay, so now we have docs.md there. What I'm going to do is go back to my Claude and I'm going to say, use the doc ingestion subagent and ingest at docs.md, then ask me for instructions when you're done. Okay, so I'm now being quite explicit because the AI tend to be quite explicit about things. Let's see if it kicks off my little pink subagent. Hopefully it will, because I'm being very explicit about it here. So it says, oh, it's trying to read my agent rules, which is fine. It's a permissioned path, so it asked me for permission. I've asked it to do that. That's fine. And it says, look, the docs.md is large, launching the doc ingestion agent. Now here comes the pink highlighted bit. So doc ingestion assistant is ingesting the docs, and it's reading about 500 lines at a time because it's a huge doc. It's massive. It's going to chunk it down into certain lines. Now, keep in mind, all of this is happening. You can see a little bit of an indent there. All of it is happening in the sub-agents context window. It is not in my main context window in my current chat. It's all happening somewhere else, right? And so this is a good way to remember that, hey, you basically outsource this giant docs.md document, right? This whole thing is now in the memory space, if you like, or more correctly, the context space of the ingestion assistance subagent. Now, this is going to take a little bit of time to go through. So if I go quiet for a while, that's why I'll probably edit this out later. You will note that it keeps updating how many tools it's using here, right? So it was 24, 26, 28, and all that tool is, if you do Control-O, you'll see it's just reading. It's the read tool, which is a tool that ships with Claude Code to do safe reading of docs. Oh, sorry, safe reading of files to be specific. All right, and so you see that it's actually consumed 20,000 tokens over almost 3 minutes compared to the 77.3 thousand tokens. So it's a lot more efficient this way. And now it's giving me a very quick summary here. And now let's say, use the subagent to give me a very concise explanation of the shortest and most readable way to add tool calling to my voice agent. Give me brief explanations and assume I don't know the line SDK. Explain concepts to me in simple terms so I understand the architecture and design of the SDK. Be as brief as possible. And I like to add this sometimes, sacrifice grammar to achieve, grammar, there we go, to achieve brevity. Okay, I like it really terse. I can ask more questions if I want. And now it should again kick off the subagent and get back to me on that. There you go. It's just kicked off the subagent. For a second there, I thought it may not do it. I'm like, that's really interesting that it wouldn't. But yeah, hopefully it's going to do that fairly quickly. And it's going to use the model that I'm using here right now. And now it's given me, let me expand this a bit, a brief all on tool calling in the line SDK, right? And it gives you the concept, step to add tools. Excellent. I like this. I'm just going to say, in fact, now I may just change the model to Haiku. Oh, I was in Opus, not Sonnet the last time, which is fine. And I'm going to change it to Haiku. And I'm going to say, write that guide down to tools.md inside Meet Zubin. All right. So now I can use it when I'm coding, and I like to handwrite some of these things sometimes, so I learn how to use the tool. But there you go. It's written something. It wants me to allow edits. And then I'm guessing it's going to be under Meet Zubin here somewhere. Tools.md, there you go, it's there. Let's close the terminal. Let's open the previewer. Let's close this, and here we go. See how terse it's being? So it's clearly taken my instructions and being quite terse, and it's given me a sense of how I need to try and implement this. So there's some concepts here and patterns that I'll need to read through and understand. As you can see, it's quite sophisticated to be able to do, and a voice agent is not an easy thing. So the line SDK obviously makes a lot of abstractions to make it easier, but there are primitives that you need to understand. It's a very sophisticated application to handle things like interruptions and speech to text and text to speech and so on. Okay, so I'll have to study this a little bit and get better, but hopefully you got an idea of how to use agents in Claude Code, how to create your own custom agent and then start to use it. And that's the one that you want to try and do. Now, if I do /agents again and go down to select mine, it'll give me the option to edit or view or delete it, etc. Or, you just go back, or you press escape to go back and get back into your chat interface. All right. Well, I hope that was helpful. I think it's a very powerful thing to be able to create custom subagents for specific projects or at a more user level. Now, I may promote this to a more user level one, but for right now, it was really good for this project because it was specifically for this project. And I can get myself study notes or Cliff's notes on a given project and its code base or the example code using something like this. Now, when you're onboarding onto, let's say, a new project, or when you're onboarding onto an open source project and you want to try and contribute to it, you can use subagents in this way to continue to chat with it. All the results that came from the subagent, for example, what it ended up writing inside tools.md, because it was returned by this to my main agent, it's now part of the main agent's context. So my main agent now knows a little bit about that. So for example, if I were to say, how would you describe what a bridge is in the line SDK, my agent hopefully will not kick off the subagent, will hopefully just take what it's already got in its own context, right? In fact, it did. And it said, here it is, an event router between node and system. Now, it didn't need that whole giant 77,000 token document to get this. This is now in its context because it was fetched by the subagent. So this is a more efficient use of my context. The subagent's context, meanwhile, is absolutely smashed with all that other content. And that's fine. Let it be there. I could always say, go back to the subagent, and I could say, produce a chapterized summary of the key concepts, write it to file, and now that new compressed file, instead of the giant GitHub thing that I ingested, could be the context that I give, at least to begin with, to my main agent. So this is how you can create very powerful ways to compose your memory across different agents and optimize context utilization, which is a way of preserving context. But I hope this was useful to you. And if so, please like and subscribe. Leave comments, ask questions. I'll try and engage as best as I can and answer any questions I can. I'm not an expert. Too much is happening too fast, too soon in AI, but I'm happy to help if I know the answer, and I'll be honest with you. So like and subscribe and check out the other videos in the Claude Code Mastery series. And I'm hoping to get one on skills and plugins in the next few weeks, whenever I get some time in between work. All right, take care and have a great 2026, everybody. Bye.
Just subscribe. You know you got to do it.